June 10th, 1886. Before sunrise, men reach Neuschwanstein Castle. High above Bavaria sits King Ludwig II in the world he built for himself. Towers, swans, painted legends. But the men at the gate haven't come as visitors. They've come to remove the king. Not after a trial. Not after a public verdict. They bring something more useful. A medical report. 4 signatures back it. Bernhard von Gudden, Friedrich Wilhelm Hagen, Hubert von Grashey, Max Hubrich. It declares the king mentally deranged, incurable, unfit to rule. And here's the most dangerous part. None of these 4 doctors ever examined Ludwig in person. This is where the fairy tale breaks. The man behind the report is Johann von Lutz, Bavaria's prime minister. Early in 1886, the cabinet refuses Ludwig a loan of 6 million marks. Several bankers secretly offer him private loans instead. The letters never reach him. Someone at court intercepts them. Ludwig writes to Bismarck instead. Bismarck tells him to bring Parliament into it. Lutz moves first. He bribes a servant to copy Ludwig's private diaries. Inside, nightly monologues with invisible guests. Confessions of fear and shame. Secret affections for servants. For a 19th century king, this isn't a slip, it's dynamite. Private notes become evidence. Evidence becomes a report. A report becomes a kingdom without a king. As the debts grow, so do the castles. Neuschwanstein, Linderhof, Herrenchiemsee. Neuschwanstein alone ends up costing 6.18 million marks, against a planned 3.2 million. Ludwig dedicates it as a tribute to Richard Wagner, whose music has carried him since youth. Wagner himself never sets foot inside it. In 1876, Ludwig still finances the first Bayreuth festival. Without his money, Wagner's Ring never gets a stage. By 1884, the debt stands at 8.25 million marks. Finance Minister Riedel tries to cover the worst of it across all 3 castles with a 7 million mark loan. Ludwig doesn't use the rescue to pay it down. He buys the ruins of Falkenstein and plans new palaces. A year later, the debt has hit 14 million. In his desperation, Ludwig briefly considers forming a secret league of loyal followers. He even weighs buying the Canary Islands as his own kingdom. With his confidant Paul von Thurn und Taxis, Ludwig retreats for a time to the Rose Island on Lake Starnberg, the same lake that will later become the final scene of his story. For Ludwig, the castles are the last rooms where he still decides, but it's exactly there that servants and valets gather the next piece of evidence. They report nights that turn into days, and days he sleeps through. Meals set for guests no one can see. A king who'd rather talk to stable boys than to his ministers. Valet Welker and equerry Hesselschwert feed Gudden every detail of the king's daily life. Even his brother Otto tells Gudden about similar fits of fear inside the family. Now even his closest relatives are supplying material for the file. Every detail goes into a dossier. Every dossier goes to Gudden. Ministers beg Ludwig to stop building. Ludwig refuses and threatens to dismiss them. From this moment on, illness is Lutz's cleanest solution. No one has to call it a power grab. They can call it protection. On June 9th, 1886, the cabinet meets in Munich. They vote to depose him. On the night of June 10th, an 11-man commission sets out for Neuschwanstein. led by Foreign Minister Friedrich Kraft von Crailsheim and Count Maximilian von Hohenstein. Gudden himself rides along, but Ludwig's coachman, Fritz Osterholzer, has caught wind of it. He warns the king. The Fussen police seal the gate. Baroness Spera von Truxas confronts the commission head-on. She curses the men and threatens them with her umbrella. They stand in the rain for half an hour. At 4:30 in the morning, the commission has to turn back empty-handed. For a moment, the king is still king. He uses the time. He has an appeal to the Bavarian people printed. In it, he accuses Luitpold and Lutz of open treason. The government seizes the print run before any newspaper can distribute it. Not one Bavarian ever reads those lines. Ludwig's brother Otto could take the throne instead. But doctors had already declared Otto incurably insane years earlier. That leaves only Uncle Luitpold as regent. On June 12th, the commission returns, this time without warning. Beforehand, they remove the door handles from inside the carriage. They take Ludwig from Neuschwanstein to Schloss Berg on Lake Starnberg, not to one of his dream castles, but to a place where others now decide his day. Others decide his condition. Others decide his freedom. At Schloss Berg, of all people, Dr. Gudden is now close by. The man whose signature ended Ludwig's freedom now sits beside him. 11 years earlier, Gudden had seen the king exactly once. Now he can finally talk to him. Now it's too late. On June 13th, around 6:30 in the evening, Ludwig and Gudden go for a walk alone by the lake. Gudden has left the attendants behind. Evening falls. They don't come back. At 8 p.m., the first police officers are sent out. Then every available man, with lamps and torches. A court official finds Ludwig's coat in the water. Half an hour later, boatman Jakob Liedl, assistant doctor Franz Karl Müller, and castle steward Hubert find the two bodies, barely 25 steps from the shore, in shallow water. Ludwig's pocket watch stopped at 6:54 p.m. Gudden's not until 8:10 p.m. An hour and 16 minutes separate the two watches. An hour and 16 minutes in which no one can say what happened on that shore. 6 days later, Dr. Grashey files a report on the final hours. He wasn't at the lake himself. Yet, he describes a struggle in the water that no witness ever saw. Gudden supposedly tried to hold the king back. Ludwig supposedly fought him off. But there's no witness. Only two stopped watches, and a doctor who truly met his patient for the first time only once it was too late. His cousin, Empress Elizabeth of Austria, known as Sisi, was one of his closest confidants. She's said to have later publicly doubted that her cousin was ever truly insane. On June 19, 1886, Ludwig's coffin is carried through Munich. Hundreds of thousands line the streets. For the ministers, the file is closed. For his people, the fairy tale king isn't a madman, he's a loss. But Neuschwanstein remained. The castle that supplied the evidence against him still shapes the image the world has of him today. Lutz got his report. Luitpold got his regency. The king got his label. And the world got one of the most famous castles in history.